Good evening and welcome to an all-new season of Blue Mondays. Blue Mondays is where we take a look at national, state, and local news through a progressive perspective. On this week's show, we've got a great show for you. First off, we have an interview with Susan Hamilton of the Lafayette Parish Library Board of Controls. Our own Ruth Yeager sits down with Susan, and they discuss what's new at the library system and what we can expect in the coming months ahead with our own library system. Some great news, some great information, and some great growth stories that we have to report tonight here on Blue Mondays. Then we have our new segment, which is This Week in History. This Week in History, we'll attempt to take a look back in history and see what progressive things have happened and probably some of the regressive things that we should probably be ashamed of. And we'll also take a look at some of the famous birthdays that we have. But first, as always, we begin with my news and commentary of this past week. Democrats now in charge in the first 100 hours. Cutting ties with lobbyists, enacting all measures of the 9/11 Commission report, raising minimum wage, cut student loan rates, and get rid of the Medicare drug program problems by allowing Medicare to negotiate lower prices. The interesting thing is, guess what? Republicans agree. The majority of Republicans also agree with these measures. So it will be quite interesting and quite helpful as we move forward in the days ahead to get these very progressive things done in the Congress, something that the Republicans leadership, led by Jim Boehner and Tom DeLay, the two infamous men, they wouldn't get it done. They refused to sign on to these things, protecting their corporate lobbyists. The only problem is Republicans don't like how we're doing it. Well, too bad, I say. The Republicans are complaining because we're using some of the same rules that they chose to use for the past 12 years in the House. They're upset that we are supposedly taking advantage of them and not being nice. Well, it's interesting to note that the Democrats tried to push forward a bill that was basically called the Minority Bill of Rights. This would allow for some of the things that the Republicans are griping about. Problem is, Republicans refused to pass it last go-around when they were in charge. Their arrogancy has now led to the position that we're in now. But the bottom line is, all of these things that we have talked about before, enacting measures of the 9/11 Commission report, cutting ties to lobbyists, raising the minimum wage, and allowing Medicare folks to negotiate the prices down for prescription drugs, those are all things that have been vetted fully through committees in the House. But yet, their former Republican leadership would not do it. They would not do anything about it. So these are all issues that have been fully debated, and it's time that they have a vote. That is what we will see in the first 100 hours of this new Congress. As I am recording this, we are now seeing the votes coming in on C-SPAN. As you see right here, the votes are coming in, and Nancy Pelosi has been elected the first female Speaker of the House. Congratulations, Madam Speaker. We're very glad to have your leadership and taking us forward in the months ahead. Moving forward, I for one think it's time for the Republicans to have a little bit of their own medicine so they can see what it's like to be in the minority and how they've treated us for the past 12 years. But it won't continue. Democrats have committed themselves to getting these bills passed in the first 100 hours, and after that is done, Democrats will lead the way, and they're not going to play games with the Republicans. We're not going to see any more late-night Rules Committee hearings or any of those types of problems. So that is definitely a good thing. Cindy Sheehan and others are upset that House Democrats will not be addressing Iraq with specific legislation passed in the first 100 hours. It's really too bad. Cindy Sheehan, I believe, sometimes presses too hard and too fast. And one of the things that will be happening for the first time ever is oversight hearings are now going to be taking place. As a matter of fact, they're already on the schedule and they will have begun this week. So to those who are concerned about what's going on in Iraq, and that's the vast majority of individuals in this country, you'll be glad to know that finally the Bush administration will have some oversight with those matters. And that's starting immediately with our new Congress. The Judiciary Committee in the Senate, led by Pat Leahy, is going to open up hearings on the Bush administration on wiretapping and other abuses of executive power. It'll be definitely interesting to see some of that oversight coming from the Senate as well. The Bush administration is definitely not happy about this, but it's high time that they have the oversight that anyone needs. Need I remind you, a famous person said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. 3,000 Americans dead in Iraq. What a terrible way for us to bring in the new year when it was announced that the 3,000th member of our troops have died over in Iraq. As the death toll continues to rise in Iraq, now surpassing the 3,000, President Bush is close to announcing a course change in Iraq. However, most speculate that this will be a troop surge of anywhere from 15,000 to 40,000 additional troops, or, as it has now been labeled and called widely, the McCain Doctrine. What everyone seems to be forgetting is we've already done this. We've already had massive troop surges where we've put an additional 20 and 30,000 troops into the theater, and guess what? Nothing changed except more of our troops died. This didn't work then, it's not going to work now, and what's probably most troubling is the senior military leadership has basically come out against this, and President Bush's response to them? You're sacked. It looks now that on the way out will be General Casey and General Abizaid. It's really, really sad. In a recent poll, Bush's plan of increasing troop sizes is incredibly unpopular with the American people, as only 11%, basically 1 in 10 people say that they support the troop surge underneath the Bush's plan, as the McCain Doctrine. Even the troops do not support the surge. A Military Times report released a week ago shows that out of 6,000 active duty U.S. military personnel, only 38% said we should increase troop levels in Iraq. Only 38%. And in fact, 42% say they completely disapprove. And only 35% say that they approve of the way Bush is handling the war. This is definitely some dire times for the Bush administration. And what I cannot wrap my mind around is, with all of these people telling the Bush administration that you're wrong, that you're approaching this wrong, Mr. President, the president seems hell-bent on pushing forward with his failed policies and plans. It's unbelievable. Regretfully, though, this has not been reported widely in mainstream media. That is definitely sad. Ding dong, Saddam is gone. Saddam Hussein is now dead. He was executed by hanging in Iraq. However, after the Bush administration released a trumpeting report saying that this is a huge step forward over in Iraq and that we're going to see major improvements now in Iraq, then we get the cell phone video. The cell phone video came out and showed terrible conditions in which he was executed. It literally shows individuals taunting him, making fun of him. It definitely was not the professional consideration that should have been taken. And now that only goes to hurt us more over in Iraq. Again, stirring the pot where it is already such a dire issue over there. Here's a summation of these events by Tom Brokaw on MSNBC.
Just talking with Richard Engel in Baghdad. Could we have a worse turn of events there with the Saddam Hussein video and all that?
No, it's, as we portray ourselves around the world as the champions of democracy and the rule of law, first of all, that began to unravel in the eyes of a lot of people in that part of the world with Abu Ghraib and the great cruelties and indignities that were imposed on people there, the debate that goes on here about Guantanamo and about access to people's private records, and then to say that we're going to install in Iraq a judicial system and a democratic form of government and have something that resembled the worst kind of nightmare out of the old American West. Not much dignity. He was a god-awful man, Saddam Hussein, and he did have a trial, but not have control of the execution and to have it really just fuel more sectarian violence at a time when we're trying to dampen that is not helpful, which is an understatement.
You know, it's a shame that Saddam was not around to face all the charges leveled against him. Many feel that justice was not served because he was only tried on just a few of the heinous things that he did in his country while he was the dictator there. You know, it's too bad that the individuals and families who face these problems and issues could not see justice had for them. It's really sad. The attacks began on Barack Obama. It appears that in a book published approximately 11 years ago, Obama admits to experimenting with drugs as a teenager. Do people forget that our current president has basically admitted the same? Stories and books have been written about all of the problems that George W. Bush has had with illegal drugs and illegal substances, not to mention that he is a so-called recovering alcoholic. But it's unbelievable to me that they are going to attack Barack Obama for actually having the guts to admit this. And also, it should be noted that the president has actually been convicted of drunk driving, where he's put other people's lives in harm's way. Unbelievable. Here's a clip of Fox and Friends discussing this matter.
This was written 11 years ago, and he talks very candidly, as did our current president, who admitted to cocaine use, correct?
No, I don't think our current president admitted to that.
Somebody wrote in the book, well, he admitted that he was an alcoholic, and that he had been in recovery.
Right,
and there were, who was it that said they witnessed him doing cocaine? It was somebody who wrote a book about the Bush family.
A lot of people have written a lot of
Okay,
but
fine.
cocaine.
But there were questions about the current president and whether or not he used cocaine as a young man.
There it is, out in this book that was written 11 years ago. Something like only 20,000 copies exist, but somebody at the Washington Post found a copy, read it, and there you've got it, Barack Obama in high school.
Somehow I think they...
It's no surprise that Fox News took this up first. John Edwards announces his run for the presidency in New Orleans. That's right, John Edwards has officially announced in New Orleans and then around the country that he is in fact running for president in 2008. Edwards, you will remember, was the running mate of John Kerry in 2004, but what you may not remember is that Edwards ran and did quite well as a first-term senator on his own accord. He was actually running for the White House back in 2004 as well, before he conceded during the Democratic primaries. Edwards shows early leads in many of the early voting states, so he is definitely the man to watch at this time. Edwards recently appeared on This Week, where he takes on the president in the proposed troop surge that he labels, and it seems to have stuck, the McCain Doctrine. Take a look.
And hopefully the next president will understand that what we've been doing is not working. And I actually myself believe that this idea of surging troops, escalating the war, what Senator McCain has been talking about, what I would call now the McCain Doctrine.
McCain Doctrine?
McCain Doctrine. He's been the most prominent spokesperson for this for some time.
General election starting early.
I'm just telling you, it's his thing, and I know John McCain very well, he and I are friends, but I think he's dead wrong about this.
Edwards also appeared on Chris Matthews' Hardball. Here's the clip from that interview.
What's your unique selling point as the Democratic candidate for 2008?
I think I have a different perspective on what needs to be done in this country. I think that some people believe that we should campaign, hope that our candidate we vote for will be elected president, and somehow that president is going to go out there and solve all our problems. I just think that's not going to happen. If we want to actually change this country, the only way to do it is for America to get involved. You know, you've heard about Bill Clinton and others talking about individual responsibility. I'm not talking about individual responsibility. I'm talking about responsibility for your country. We want people to take responsibility for their country, to not just wait for the government to solve their problems, but the government and Americans to work together to solve problems, which is why I've been talking about Americans actually going out there and taking action instead of waiting for the next election. I think that's different.
President Bush, in his last press conference last week, said his idea was for America to go shopping. He literally said that. What do you make of that as a way to engage the public in our national cause?
What planet is he living on? I have absolutely no idea. I mean, this is the man that's in charge of this war in Iraq. You know, after September 11th, we had an extraordinary moment of unity and a proud feeling of patriotism. I had it myself. All of us had it. And it was a great opportunity for us to tap into the will of the American people to do great things together, not just for themselves, but for America. Well, see, I don't think that will and feeling has gone away. And the next president of the United States needs to tap into it and say, not in an ideological way, not in a partisan way, but say, these are the great things that we can do as Americans, but you can't sit home and complain that somebody else is not doing their job. If you actually want America to be great, you're going to have to step out and take some responsibility yourself and do something.
Definitely, by these interviews, we can definitely see that John Edwards is a force to be reckoned with. He's doing an incredible job of plugging into the grassroots activists around the country, and millions of them are signing on with his campaign. So it'll definitely be something to watch. Already announced on the Republican side is John McCain, who has apparently given up his Straight Talk Express to position himself further to the right, obviously pandering to the evangelicals. Massachusetts former governor, Mitt Romney has also announced that he is running, as has Giuliani. They're basically staying on the sidelines, but they've formed the exploratory committees. They have websites up and running, so you might want to check those out. So I think we officially have a race. On the Democratic side, we have Tom Vilsack, former governor, has announced that he is running, but his name recognition is incredibly low. Governor Mark Warner of Virginia has announced that he will not seek the White House, and of course, the two giants still considering their runs are Senators Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. America says goodbye to a president. President Gerald Ford recently passed away, and we hope you were able to catch at least part of his memorial services. Ford was a really good man. He was very upset as to where the Republican Party has recently taken itself in the recent years. He was a true conservative, and perhaps was the reason why when I registered to vote for the first time, I actually registered as a Republican. However, then I got to see and probably investigate and find out more of what happened in the 12 years of the Reagan and Bush administrations, Bush 41, and needless to say, I immediately changed my party affiliation. Much has been said about Ford in his choice to pardon Nixon. One thing that most agree on is that by issuing that pardon, it most likely cost him the White House when he actually ran for the first time. Interesting tidbit, Ford is the only president that was not elected. He was not elected to either the presidency or the vice presidency, as you may or may not know. Interesting bit of tip. But it is also, with regards to the pardon, one thing is clear, it helped this country move on from the Watergate era. Although I know many people who would have liked to have seen Nixon actually held to account for all of the things that he did in his abuse of power. Of course, it kind of looks like a cakewalk with what we've seen in the past 6 years of the Bush administration. In a parting shot, Ford asked that his interviews, where he completely and candidly spoke on the war in Iraq and the Bush administration, be held until his death, because he viewed the role as former presidents should be more quiet and respectful of the office. However, he rips into the Bush administration. Covering this, Chris Matthews takes on the right-left argument, on Iraq with a Republican talking head. Here's the clip. Take a look.
The bigger picture, and is there a picture much bigger than Iraq and something greater than this, left-right debate we're having over this war in Iraq.
I don't think it's left-right anymore. I think when you hear people like President Ford, as you pointed, chime in posthumously, and people like Bill Buckley, William F. Buckley, and George Will, I don't hear a lot of traditional conservative support
Chris,
for this
I fully
war.
agree that Republicans are starting...
No, traditional Republicans would never have brought us into this war. This is a neoconservative war. Karen, this is a neoconservative war fought by strange ideologues with their own strange objectives. This is not a party, a Republican Party that would have supported this war traditionally. Ronald Reagan would not have taken us over there. Jerry Ford would not have taken us over there. I don't know which Republican president would have led us into the desert, put the American army stuck in Iraq. Only one president did that with the help of Dick Cheney and the neocons. We'll be right back with...
It's unbelievable to me that these talking heads can't even get themselves on the same page now anymore, that they're still trying to cast this as a right-left view where the vast majority of Americans are all on the same page. As a matter of fact, the recent polling information that we shared with you earlier seems to indicate that. More bad news for Bush. In a recent poll that was just released, things don't look so good for President Bush. Here's the clip. Take a look.
Associated Press asked Americans to name this past year's biggest villain. Mr. Bush topped the list, ahead of the dictator expected to be executed in a matter of hours, ahead of Osama bin Laden, and ahead of the Prince of Darkness, Satan. Now, you don't have to have a political doctorate in political science to realize it's never a good sign when you're outpolled by Lucifer.
Wow, that's all I have to say. Wow. And that is your Democratic news for January 8th, 2007. We want to remind you that Blue Mondays is on each and every Monday night here on AOC Channel 15 at 9 p.m. We are very happy to be here in our home and coming to you every single Monday night at 9 p.m. We're also replayed frequently, so you'll want to check out our website where we'll hope to have all of our replay information listed within the coming week or so once we get that from AOC. It'll definitely be good for you to be able to tune in and check us out. Also, on the progressive side of things, you'll want to check out Democracy Now! Democracy Now! Airs every single weekday on Channel 16 at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. Democracy Now!, as you may know, is hosted by Amy Goodman, and every single day they bring us the unembedded, unbiased information, that news that is being brought to us every single day. Definitely a great place to check out. Also, each and every week, you'll be able to check out my weekly column on the Daily Advertiser's website at theadvertiser.com called The Left Blog. Every single week, I take on and hopefully cut into a lot of the Republican spin, and especially as we move forward in the days and weeks ahead, 2007 is definitely going to shape up to be a very interesting year here in Louisiana, with all of our seats, both here in the parish as well as in our state government, is going to be changing hands, or at least they're all up for re-election. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, especially with all of the individuals that are affected by term limits. You'll also want to check out LafayetteDemocrats.org for all of your Democratic news. You'll be able to check in there where we try and do a good job of keeping up on the latest happenings. Or, if you'd like, you can always get a hold of us on the Democratic hotline, which is 769-7347. We hope that you will reach out and tell us what you think of this show. Give me a call, leave me a voicemail, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you just as soon as I can. In our new segment, This Week in History, we are going to take a look back in history and see what happened this second week of January in all of the previous years. You'll definitely want to take a look at this. Some great information out there to see what happens. The history segment This Week in History is not necessarily going to always focus on the positive things, as you'll see. Some of the times we take a look back to see some of the really bad things that have happened in our past. But without a doubt, you'll be able to see what's happened in history. And also, we're going to bring you some of the famous birthdays of individuals that you may want to know. So here is our new segment called This Week in History. This Week in History. The famous things that have happened on January 8th in 1790, George Washington delivers the first State of the Union address in New York City. In 1867, African American men are granted the right to vote in the District of Columbia. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson declares a war on poverty in the United States. In 1973, the Watergate scandal, the trial of 7 men accused of placing bugs in the Democratic Party headquarters at Watergate begins. In 1982, AT&T agrees to divest itself of 22 subdivisions, breaking up the Big Bell. January 9th, famous things that have happened. In 1929, the Seeing Eye is established in Nashville, Tennessee with a mission to train dogs for assisting the blind. In 1951, the United Nations headquarters officially opens in New York City. January 11th in history, 1935, Amelia Earhart is the first woman to fly solo from Hawaii to California. January 12th in history, 1932, Hattie W. Caraway becomes the first woman elected to the United States Senate. In 1991, the Persian Gulf War, an act of the U.S. Congress, authorizes the use of military force to drive Iraq out of Kuwait. January 13th in history, 1942, the United States begins the Japanese-American internment. In 1966, Robert C. Weaver becomes the first African-American cabinet member by being appointed to the United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. In 1990, L. Douglas Wilder becomes the first elected African-American governor as he takes office in Richmond, Virginia. January 14th in history, 1943, Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes the first president of the United States to travel via airplane while in office, Miami, Florida to Morocco to meet with Winston Churchill to discuss World War II. And that is a look at history. Famous birthdays that we are celebrating this week: Stephen Hawking, David Bowie, Mary J. Blige, Sheila Jackson Lee, Rush Limbaugh, Howard Stern, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Patrick Dempsey, Orlando Bloom, Andy Rooney, LL Cool J, and Jason Bateman. Happy birthday all. And that is a look in the past, this week in history.
Global warming. Some say irreversible consequences are 30 years away. 30 years? That won't affect me.